Right. We are following up on what I would call Elite Series. And today, I would like to call this topic Becoming Legally Thin. So we got Alex in today, and I'll just let you to speak a bit about yourself. I want to know, who the hell are you? Why am I talking to you? So what are you actually doing? How did you get into doing what you are doing for a living now? And basically, it's your passion. I can tell by the way you're putting the content out and just the quality of stuff you put out. And just mention some clients. I know you work with some Olympians. You work with guys who turn pro. You work with pros who've been competing at extremely high levels. You work with all kind of people, all kind of different shapes and sizes. And then I'm going to try to pick up your brain on how to become as thin as possible in all means necessary. So let's hit it off. Let's hear from you.
I like it. So first of all, thank you for having me. For people that don't know, our connection was through Broderick. And actually that was how I met Andrew Trion, again, best friend in the world. So I owe so much to Broderick just for that. The fact that he knows a lot of good people, it's cool that we can all connect. So always a big shout out to Broderick because he brings people together, which is cool. It kind of sucks because I'm pretty terrible at talking about myself. Usually when people ask me that, I say, I just got lucky and I'm just doing what I love. Like I just really got lucky with that. In reality, if you scroll back, let's see, it was, so the basic high school sports. So I was doing lacrosse and amateur boxing. Just the traditional thing, trying to look for where to go in life. Ended up getting a concussion after I had a full ride for lacrosse to college. And that was my junior year in high school. So that limited any kind of physical activity. Couldn't walk for a year, or I couldn't walk for about 6 months. I was literally, I don't want to say in a coma, but I was in my bed and my family had to do everything for me for those 6 months after the concussion. So I had to retrain my brain how to think, how to speak, how to move. Motor learning was terrible. And it was a really long recovery process. And that was where I was kind of like, okay, about to go to college. I need to figure out how to heal my freaking brain so that I'm not retarded for the rest of my life. So that was kind of where everything started. At that same time, since I couldn't do any more sports, my best friend at the time, his brother was competing in bodybuilding. And he had a coach, and the coach to this day is a very good guy. Don't talk to him anymore, but he got me started into the bodybuilding realm. So massive. His name's Derek Natcher. Awesome, nice guy. Haven't followed him in years, but still just a really good guy. So he really taught me just the basics of bodybuilding. And remember, this is back whenever you're learning about counting calories and macronutrients. So the very bare bones stuff, but everyone starts somewhere. So started there, went to school. I was originally going to be a dietitian. And I realized I actually interned with what was her name? Bonnie Tracy. So she works for the Pittsburgh Steelers, so a professional football team, and she was their dietitian. I got to go spend some time with her, and I realized, holy crap, dietitians kind of suck. Not in the sense that they suck as people, but the sense that they suck in what they're limited in what to say. Because obviously what we do as contest prep coaches, whether it's pharmaceutical advice, whether it is nutritional training advice, mechanics, whatever it is, they are very limited by the law. And I didn't like that. She would literally have meal plans like buffet style for the actual competitors, so for the actual football players. And I thought that was lame. That's not what I wanted to do. So I left that program, went over, and I actually went into an entire performance enhancement injury prevention track. Did that, got my master's. At that time, I started prep coaching at 18 years old. I was just posting on the bodybuilding.com forums, posting up my workouts, posting up some random knowledge that I thought was good, had a YouTube channel, and people started wanting to work with me. They thought I had something to offer. I didn't think I did, but I was like, cool, I'll do this for free because I don't know what I'm doing anyway. Had a lot of success early on where it was one of those things where I don't know why, but my gut just told me, okay, this is the right time to manipulate carbohydrates. This is the right time if we're in peak week to manipulate fluid or ion distribution or whatever it may be. And first 5 or 10 people I put on stage, everyone was winning. Everyone was doing so good. That was with naturals. Then all of a sudden, these enhanced individuals started reaching out to me. I knew nothing about drugs at that time. So I told them, I don't know shit about pharmacology, but I know the other stuff. So as that was going on, the YouTube channel, I don't want to say it was taking off, but one individual person, he is a pharmaceutical engineer out of Israel. And I attribute, like I just gave Broderick a lot of credit, I attribute everything else to this guy. Can't say his name because he's been in the background, but he was the guy who he worked at Pfizer, worked at Eli Lilly before, and he decided, okay, I'm going to break away from this and do my own thing because manufacturing performance enhancing drugs is a very lucrative business. You can make a lot of money if you don't mind skirting around the law. So either way, he saw something in me on my YouTube channel and decided to reach out to me. I didn't know who he was. I only knew his username, but he decided to basically mentor me just for free because he liked what I had to offer. He liked me as a person and my gut instincts and calls with just coaching people and putting people on stage. So he taught me all the basics. Turns out I found this out maybe a year or two ago. Him, Broderick, Dan Duchesne, a couple of those original, we'll say chemists, the people that really knew the pharmacology, he was in contact with them throughout all the years. So over the decades, their paths kind of crossed. And as the internet grew, things grew from there. But that guy gave me so much information. I owe so much to him. And it was because of that, it was connections I made from him that really propelled me to where I am now, where I have individuals at different pharmaceutical industries, individuals at different, honestly, colleges. So different professors, different PhDs, different researchers that are researching whatever, cancer research, people are looking at the gut microbiome, people that anything to do with the human body, I basically know someone everywhere. So I was paying for their time and consultation fees to just learn more. So I spent more money on those consults than I did on my entire master's. So fast forward a little bit, I had the decision, okay, I have my master's now, I have a really good potential to make income with this coaching thing. And I could have either continued on, got my PhD and, worked as an actual professor in a human performance research lab and make less money, or I could start doing the coaching thing, probably something I like more and probably make more money in the first year. So I did that. I went full-time as a prep coach, made, I think it was 3 or 4 times as much as I was making at a time in a year, again, because back then you're making over in the States, like 10, 12,000 bucks. So first year, like, 40, 50, 60 grand. Holy shit, this is more money than ever. I'm doing this. And it's just steamrolled since there. It's really been, because now we're going on roughly 10 years of coaching, which is not very long at all, if you really think about it. But the amount of exposure that I've had over those years and the number of clients and the number of things that I've seen, and the awesome thing with social media is more than half of the information, because I have files and charts and notes on my computer of responses to DNP, to growth hormone, to insulin, to trenbolone, every pharmaceutical drug that you can imagine under the sun for not only bodybuilding and physique-based athletes, because I work with them. I work with strongmen, I work with powerlifters, I work with professional basketball players, I work with, right now, a pro tennis player, high-level chess players, fencers, you name it, any kind of sport. I've probably helped people, and I help people be drug tests for certain professional sports or the Olympics, things like that of that caliber. And because I keep all these charts, because I just like learning so much, I have this amalgam of information to where I can pull from. So the general response of metformin, for example, okay, let's look at the gut interactions there. About less than 1% of people, I think that's what the number works out to be, actually have that negative gut interaction. So you take metformin, it actually does some cool things. So it rearranges the gut bacteria in a more favorable environment. But for that small 1% of people, it actually upregulates bacteria that we don't want in the gut. So it'll upregulate that, cause the GI problems, people will shit, vomit, things like that. That's less than 1% out of a couple thousand people. Then again, going back to the magic of social media, you have people reaching out. They see your content and they say, this was my blood work on this. This was my response to this. Is this normal? And so you just collect that data over the time. So I feel like I'm in a very cool position right now because I am just learning so freaking much every day. I mean, from the own stuff that I'm researching on my own, and I'm trying to learn from the consults that I pay for still to this day, from the actual experience of application of working with general population people all the way up to Olympic and professional level athletes. Shit, the amount of knowledge that I'm learning in a day is just so much fun for me. So I really get off on this learning process and education and application. So I guess that's a little long-winded background about me. I know I said that I was bad about talking about myself in the beginning, but apparently I'm not, because I went on there for like probably 10 minutes. So
no, it's cool. Like things I've heard, like especially about nutritionists and whatnot, because I did my master's degree in nutrition, and it's same exact stuff. I had to do this anti-doping agency qualification, all little things, get signed up to these sports and exercise and nutrition register and whatnot. And somewhere along the line, I realized I can't tell them jack shit what's happening in real life.
Yeah,
like,
it
I'm
sucks,
so restricted, and I'm like, what's the flipping point? I'm like, so I got myself off register just for that kind of thing. I'm like, at least I can tell them what's really happening instead of just bullshitting them around. Because let's be honest, like the best athletes will always have someone who is doing much more than they kind of sign up for. That's how you get good. You have these 1-2%, but you do a little bit extra. And for me, I think like yourself, you probably don't do anyone justice just by following strict rules just because someone said you need to. It's not helping anyone. It's just kind of pulling wool over their eyes, you know. So, and another thing, it's like you spoke about mentors and having all those kind of things. So uh, it's never enough to learn, isn't it? So like that's why I probably like value everyone I work with, because those people have to be willing to learn. It's like yourself, Broderick, and Andre. So you're always learning. And if you stop doing that, and if you end up just coaching, you just get forgotten because things never stand on place.
And I think that's the number one problem with all coaches, where they start off, they get a big name, they get so busy that they just stop learning and they stop continuing their education. And then that's wherever a younger prep coach comes in and starts taking the cake, starts taking clients from them. It's not because they're not good at their job anymore. It's because they're getting less efficient at their job and less good, if that's a really good word to say it, because they just stopped learning. And it's funny too, because I feel like such an idiot. By the end of the day, after I go through whatever I'm going through, like I showed you my notebook before on some of the growth hormone somatropic cascades I'm learning, I feel like such a dipshit by the time I go to bed. I'm like, wow, I got a lot of learning to do for tomorrow. And then you have conversations with people that are a lot smarter than you, and you go, holy shit, I'm really behind. I really have a lot of work to do. So in reality, like you said, that knowledge aspect, it's a never-ending continuum. The coaching aspect, the application, it's the same thing, but I think that's what kind of makes it fun. It's always interesting. And that's why I couldn't just work with professional level athletes. I need different kinds of people. It couldn't be the same sport. It couldn't be just general population. It couldn't be just competitors. I like having a little bit of everything because you run into different problems everywhere. And then those problems will crop up in other scenarios. You already know what to do. So the thing I usually say, and people, if they've seen me before, it's probably annoying, but I say it's plug and play. Like peak week, for example, I could put anyone on stage completely full, completely dry, regardless. I don't care who they, I don't care about the gender, don't care about anything. I just, again, I don't want to sound cocky or arrogant, but I've seen it all. I know exactly what to do. And if I see something new, I know exactly who to talk to fix it in 5 seconds, or I've already seen some variation. So I have that gut instinct, and that gut instinct is something you can't teach. I hate saying that because I'm all about, our body being as plastic as possible, us being able to change anything. But there is an element to coaching, especially high level competitors, where if you don't have that gut instinct in that eye, man, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. I can't tell you how many times I've told people during peak week, you know what? I don't know why, but my gut's telling me we need to drop fluids, drop sodium, and maybe do an insulin pulse or whatever the fact may be. And it works like magic. Every single time, it's that gut instinct. And that can't be taught, but the experience makes that better and better and better.
Yeah, I think that's where real life data comes in place. And you kind of, if you don't know how to kind of understand the difference between what you're learning from your scientific papers, it's very different to how it actually works in real life. Yeah, you take it as a guideline, but understand that it's a very restricted guideline. And there are so many other things that come into play. And I like what you say, like regards coaching and whatnot. So when they get too busy, I think too many coaches are focused on making money instead of adding value. And that's why they disappear. They are around 3, 5, 10 years, and it's just poof. Whereas those like yourself and some others, like I can probably count a handful, that really focus on making their content as valuable as possible are the ones that survive and actually like thrive on it. Whereas others are just filling their hours in, and probably this is where it's wrong. But that's a side topic. We can talk about it. But let's get back to getting as thin as possible. So have you got like any kind of principle where you look at someone that to get someone as lean as possible, they need to have specific training experience, or they need to train in a specific style, or maybe some kind of specific nutritional approach that always, I wouldn't say always, but in majority of times works the best. Let's start with training experience. How important it is for someone to be I wouldn't class it as training experience in years, but quality training experience to get as lean as possible. So can you get someone who is just starting out, let's say 3-4 years, as lean as someone who has been 3-4 years coached by someone how to train efficiently? Is there massive difference?
I like that question because it's different. So the reality of the question is yes. Doesn't matter if you have 50 pounds of contractile actual myosin actin tissue on you, or if you have, like, I don't want to say negative, but the people that are just so ridiculously skinny, you don't understand what's going on. Body fat can be lost, can be gained. It doesn't matter about whatever other factors are in the equation. So when you look at that, though, the difference in how someone looks, the more muscle tissue you have, the more developed the muscle is, the better it's going to look. So although, let's say right now, you clearly have more muscle tissue than me, you clearly have better muscle architecture, you probably have a better drug response and overall metabolism of all these drugs. Your genetics from every angle you can think about are better than mine. So if you and me were both to get shredded right now, chances are you're going to look a hell of a lot better than me, even if we were the same weight on stage, because we have different orthopedic structures. We have different muscle architecture, different muscle bellies and insertions, different amount of years of training. That training, and again, people, and this is, I don't want to say they're doing it wrong, but whenever people like to use a lot of voluminous-based drugs, we're adding a lot of glycogen synthase, a lot of creatine synthase, a lot of things that are going to retain fluid intramuscularly, which is awesome. But if you were looking at that actual actin myosin, that cross-bridging, that bending, breaking, bridging aspect of contraction, that is what gives someone that harder look, that harder appearance, because it's actual tissue, it's actual skeletal muscle tissue that's being built. So people that just take the DHTs to just drive protein expression, that may not be the only thing they need, but that is what's going to give that appearance. It's literally just more muscle tissue versus more overall volume. That volume is very important. Muscle tissue is obviously fluid, nitrogen, ions, all of these things in tissue. So it's not to say that it's not important, but if you have someone who's been training for a year versus someone who's been training for 5 years, the person who trains for 5 years has so much more muscles, literally so much more tissue and meat on their frame, they're going to look better at the same level of body fat. And I also feel, I guess I'll throw this here now, I hate how bodybuilding is becoming a glute contest, because the reality of the situation is I've had some people where we get lines into their asshole and there's a million striations. You have some people where they have 4 glute striations. You have some people, again, looking at muscle architecture and insertions, who just weren't genetically blessed. They will never have a striation in their glutes. They could have so much tissue there, but guess what? They'll get vascular, they'll get separated, but they won't have multiple striations. That comes back to the genetics of the individual. But you won't know your true genetics until you have at least an appreciable amount of muscle tissue. So long-winded way to answer that question, but yes, you can get anyone as peeled as you need them to be at any level of muscular development. The higher the amount of muscularity, the better the end result and the easier it's going to be. Obviously, muscle tissue, metabolically active, calorie consumptive, you're going to be able to eat more calories. It just makes the process a whole lot easier. So if you're working with a newbie, as a coach, it's usually pretty hard because some people got to starve. If you're a female, low calories, high cardio is probably going to be in your future, unless if you're a heavy muscled female. It sucks, but that's also part of that gender's traits. So looking at that muscle tissue, years in the gym, it does obviously change the equation, but you can still get anyone shredded in terms of competition.
Yes, that's cool. So when you go from there, so the way you touched up on genetics and like comparing us and all those kind of things, do you think there is a component that you basically change your genetics, if that even makes sense? I hope you can kind of understand me. Through years that you can tolerate something that you kind of try to implement all the time. So for example, what I mean by that, if you start out and you just eat heavy carbs all the time, you will respond better to high carb diets and all those kind of things. Or if you start eating really low carbs, so you respond better to that. So what do you think? Do you think there is a place in kind of your genetical dispositions that you are either responding to this or that, or you can train your body to respond to thing you want it to respond?
And that's the $1 million question, because the reality of looking at some basics of sports performance and just performance enhancement, injury prevention, is we understand where nitrogen has its place. We understand where glucose has its place. We realize that once we'll say a small but significant amount of dietary fat needs are met from a neurological cell membrane health standpoint, then you're probably going to be fine. So what that usually looks like is a higher protein, higher carbohydrate, lower moderate fat diet. That's the traditional sports way to go for performance, for body composition, for everything. The problem is what you just said. Our body is very plastic. Our body changes depending on the environment, depending on the stressors, and depending on everything. So you can literally, even though you're in that environment, you can all of a sudden go on the, everyone loves going keto or carnivore or whatever the fad diet is, and you realize everything has its place. Because the reality is you can literally make anything work. So you will get your body to adapt over time and time again. Now, the reality of the situation in an application standpoint is that most people will not respond as well on a ketogenic diet compared to a higher carbohydrate type diet. That's just the reality of it. It's not to say that people can't make progress, because they definitely can. Would be optimal, depends on the individual. So I don't like it as pitting against high carbohydrate diets versus high fat diets. I would much rather look at it as look at that individual, look at the lifestyle, look at the stressors that are being imposed upon them, and okay, delineate from there. If we have a marathon runner, why the fuck would we not have glucose out the ass in that situation? If you're looking at an MMA fighter, why would we not have glucose out the ass for that? There's certain parameters and energy systems that you almost can't beat. But at the same time, once you introduce drugs, that changes the equation too. Because we see all the time now, everyone's saying, oh, I've been vegan for a year, and they're building all this muscle tissue. People can't understand how they're doing that. Remember, they're getting muscle protein synthesis, they're getting genomic, they're getting genetic manipulations and nuclear changes from a freaking bottle. They're getting all of their growth from a bottle of testosterone, primabol, and nandrolone, whatever the drug is of choice. We have the changes that happen genetically with growth hormone. So growth hormone actually changes your genetics long-term in multiple different ways. One of those ways with growth hormone is actually change pre-adipocytes. So before a fat cell, an adipocyte, before it actually grows, growth hormone can actually come in, stop that process from happening in the first place. So it turns on lipid reducing genes and downregulates a couple lipid accumulation genes. So that's pretty freaking cool. So we can change our genetics through drug use. We can also change all of that experience, or rather, we can change our personal biological response based on what we're giving at that time from a nutritional aspect. So overall, though, I'm saying I much favor the traditional approach. If you're a professional athlete, if you're an athlete as a whole, you're most likely going to respond better to higher nitrogen, higher glucose-based environment with enough fats. That doesn't mean low fats. That doesn't mean moderate. It means enough fats. For a lot of people, that's the traditional, what does the math work out to be? It's like about 0.75 to a gram of fat per kilogram. That's a pretty good range for most people. Once you're in prep, okay, that changes and goes out the window. That's most people. Doesn't mean you can't do a ketogenic type diet, but it's just less people rather, respond better to that approach than the former. But at the end of the day, you can make everything work. So in terms of answering your question, setting everything up for, let's say, the ability to build the most amount of muscle tissue over time and then lose the most body fat over time, I would much rather favor almost always the higher protein, higher carbohydrate, moderate enough fat intake. But again, it always comes back to the individual. With drug use, with training, with nutrition, it always comes back to what does that person need at this point in time? How are they responding? What's their lifestyle like? What's their environment like? And then you can proceed from there.
That's interesting, because a couple of years ago, I had a chance to talk to Tom Platz, and he said he used to always mix it. He would have higher carb approach to diet down. And then when he wasn't really competing, then he would go higher fats and all those kind of things. And he was big believers that you need to let your body go through different stages. Basically, first of all, you don't get bored with it. And he believes that you respond better if you change those approaches now and then. So
see, and that's exactly it though. So anyone listening, rewind and listen to what he just said. He gets bored of always having a higher carbohydrate diet. So right away, psychologically, neurologically, that tells you, okay, he's already going to be going into a diet with a less than optimal mind state, which is going to change nutrient partitioning and your response as a whole. The power of freaking thought is so ridiculous. I don't know if you've ever read, there's that one popular study people usually reference. It was the placebo versus the, they basically told people they were taking Dianabol, and the other group, they said they weren't taking anything. In reality, the Dianabol was glucose tablets. That group still gained like 5 kilograms more muscle tissue. They still lost 3 kilograms of body fat, or whatever the metrics were. I can't remember off the top of my head. but the power of thought and that entire aspect is a very real thing. So if Tom, and I don't know him personally, I know enough people that have known him personally for years, it's pretty obvious to anyone who's seen a video of him, neurologically, he's wired differently than most of us. So the power of his thought is probably 10 times more strong than yours or mine or whoever's listening to this. So if he believed it, I 1,000% believe that it was going to be that way. And that's a very valid way to change a diet. There's never a reason to turn up your nose at anything like that. Regardless of the reason, that placebo effect is 1,000% a real thing. If you believe it enough, you can change it and make it happen.
Yeah, there is a book, Joe Dispenza, You Are Placebo, and he goes balls deep on all that kind of stuff.
Yep, I love that one.
And this reminded me, we had a guy back home. He bought a protein tube, emptied it, put all just baking flour in it, sold it to someone, told him this is the best stuff, it's going to make you grow. And the guy gained 7 kilos in 4 weeks. And we were all like, what on earth? And he was like so excited. Yeah, I'm going to gain this. It's good. Obviously, he started train much harder, eat much better, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, I can't even imagine how he was drinking that stuff.
Yeah, that's funny. But that's true, though. Again, he thought, he believes in 1,000%. And that's exactly why if you're doing your own coaching for yourself or you're hiring a coach, you need to 1,000% believe in them and in the process, trust in the process. If you're setting up yourself or having someone else do it, it doesn't matter. You have to believe in it 1,000%.
Yeah, so mindset is everything. It's everything. Like whatever you do, if your head is not right, you're never going to put an effort into it. And I speak a lot with some clients. I don't get them anymore because I kind of made it clear cut with whom I work and whatnot. But I used to get people like, oh, I wish I could get fit. Why can't you? Oh, because I need to buy my shoes. I need to buy membership. I need to buy petrol for car. I need to do this. I need to do that. Million things. Like, what do you like to do? Oh, I like going out with my mates. What does it take you? What do you mean? I just call them and go out. Oh, you don't need to buy petrol. You don't need to buy clothing. You don't need to organize where you're meeting them up. All these things go out of the window suddenly. It's like, I never thought about that. I'm like, yeah, because you are already there. You are going to do whatever it takes to have a good time with your friends.
Yeah.
And until you realize that your fitness journey needs to be exactly the same, you need to have clear cut. This is why I'm doing it. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there. It's not going to work. So if you hire a coach and you don't believe in them, like, look, I'm going to listen to them and make sure I do everything there is and then draw my conclusions. If coach is great, he'll tell, look, probably we did this wrong. Let's do this next and all those kind of things. But yeah, mindset is probably the most important thing, which brings me to next thing with all this. So before you even go into getting someone lean, I personally think you would go like let's check if you're healthy enough to do this. So what are you looking for in an athlete who reaches out to you? Look, I want to get leaner, or I want to get like shredded to the bone. What are the parameters you would say anyone needs to check before they even look into that kind of stuff?
So this is funny because blood work wise, it's very often where I will get someone, and the blood work parameters we're looking for things like your CMP, CBC, lipids, things like that, things that actually matter for your health, your hematology panel, all that kind of shit. We're not checking so much your testosterone, your estrogen, your IGF, things like that, because these drugs are freaking working. If you know they're real, if you understand where you're getting them from, and if you understand all the manufacturing behind that, that arbitrary value of testosterone, of being 1,000 nanograms per deciliter or 5,000, yes, there is going to be some difference in anabolism, but all those changes are happening at a nuclear level. How many people do you know have used growth hormone, gotten their IGF test back, and it's increased, but not crazy, but yet they're rounder, they're fuller, all of these fat loss effects, all the changes with pre-adipocytes, the changes with colloid synthesis, the changes with recovery, the changes with, you name it, cellular swelling and that ion fluid retention intramuscularly, that's all happening because those are nuclear changes that are happening regardless. With the growth hormone, that myonuclear donation aspect of things, that's freaking happening. If growth hormone is real, it's going to do that regardless of some arbitrary IGF value. Now, those values aren't irrelevant, but at the end of the day, for testosterone, for estrogen, for IGF, they only matter to a point because these drugs are going to do exactly what they were meant to do. Now, androgens are much more of the dummy-proof drugs. You take a long ester, you cannot screw that up unless if the trained nutritional parameters are not met there to fuel all the drugs processes. But even then, it's kind of hard to screw up. The sophisticated drugs, like your growth hormone, your insulin, your DNP, your things of that nature, is very dependent on the environment it's introduced to. So yes, you can screw up those. You can get less bang for your buck. Sometimes you can have someone use metformin at the wrong time and literally gain body fat and use it poorly and wrong. That's a conversation for another day. But essentially, when we're looking at blood work, we actually care about the health of the athlete. So if you are taking PEDs, it's usually an every 2 to 3 month type of thing. Every 2 to 3 months, you're getting your blood work done. Depending on your mesocycle, I try and make it easy for people, and we get it done at the end of a meso. So we want to get it done at the peak of a blast and at the peak of a cruise. So you can see your body at its worst and at its best. And then from there, you can kind of say, okay, do we even need over-the-counter health supplementation? We'll need our basic vitamins for systemic health. We'll need our basic minerals for that actual, receptive process at actual androgen receptors, insulin receptors, all those things, cofactors. But what else do we need? Do we need something to cover your lipids like a citrus bergamot? So that works for that 8-MG coenzyme A reductase way. So it's nocturnal activity, so you take it at night. Do you need something like an EPA DHA from a fish oil, krill oil? Is that the kind of lipid cascade that we need? Is it not even a lipid issue, not a cardiovascular issue? Are you the person that just has terrible renal health? Is that renal health caused by an architectural problem, something that you need to cover from an EGFR aspect like an astragalus or whatever? So you fill in the blank. So if you're getting your blood work done every end of your mesocycle, for me, I try to cap that at about 12 to 20 weeks. It's mostly 15, 16 weeks. So you're getting it done all those times. You're checking your blood work. And then from there, you're putting your program together. Is it time to actually push any kind of androgens or any drugs as a whole? Is it time to pull back? Not only that, but what's your lifestyle look like for the next 6 months? If you're starting a prep, your life is terrible, your wife is about to leave you, your business is failing, and you want to put more drugs onto an already stressed out equation, you are just setting yourself up for failure. Because it all goes back, and I'm sure everyone's heard this name before, but Dr. Hans Selye with his Life of Stress book, that's the book that everyone needs to read because it's all the stress management and systemic fatigue equation. So if you are going into a prep, which is inherently driving up more systemic fatigue, taking more drugs, driving up more systemic fatigue, and everything else in your life is terrible, don't fucking take the drugs. Don't start prep. You're literally starting yourself on a bad foot. So don't only line it up with your blood work and your health, but also what's going to happen from a stress standpoint in 4 months, 6 months, things like that. And that's where it goes back to periodization. So periodization is just planning. It doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. It's literally just planning for your goal. If you don't know where you want to go in 6 months, a year, 5 years from now, how can you know where to go? You don't, like for us, because we're over in the States. I know you guys are over in the UK, but Florida, it's it's like a day drive from here for me. If I didn't put that on my GPS, I wouldn't know how the fuck to get there. You don't just go and start driving and hope you get there. You have to know where you want to go. So it's the same thing. So you need to have everything planned out, put your blood work in play, have checkpoints, and go from there.
Yes, that's cool. Not many people do that.
Usually with people, it's hard because you need to make sure you have commitment of the athletes. But essentially what you're looking for is trying to set up some kind of periodization for at least a year. So you have blocks in segments of, okay, if we have a good example, this year, 2020, I had multiple people competing, say at X time, and then we were competing 3 months later. So that's 4, 8, 12 weeks. How do you peak and then peak again in 12 weeks? That's not enough time to grow, well, for most people. That's not enough time to get too fat. But you also can't just keep pushing because they were already contest lean. How do you manage that systemic fatigue? So you have to purposefully put on 3 to 5 pounds of fat very quickly. You have to purposefully pull that off very quickly. And then you have to peak again, all managing fatigue in the background. So if you don't have that planned out and mapped out, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Another example, so I have Chol competing on the Olympia stage. Friday night is when you step on stage for prejudging. You have to hold that conditioning until Saturday. So what do? You peak for Friday, you spill Friday night, you wake up, you actually have room to move and peak for Saturday night. The people that hold their conditioning Friday to Saturday night at the Olympia level, that's the people who end up on stage Saturday night at the finals flat and terrible looking and almost that stringy look. I mean, at that level, they're so freaking big. It's hard to say they look stringy, but stringy for them compared to that. It's because they didn't do that. So you can't just hold conditioning and stay there. You need to manipulate variables in the background to actually be able to hold it. Just goes back to periodization. And what is that? That's just planning.
That brings me into, before we go into deep stuff, what are the most common things that you would suggest someone who was wanting to try to get lean that they can just get over the counter? So what you are looking into, you go through bloods. What are the most common things that flares up to you? Like, okay, this might be needed So we are just having your health at optimal level before you, let's be honest, destroy you, because getting super shredded is not healthy. So what are the most common things coming out from your data you have collected so far? Is that what are people usually lacking, and what are these little things that makes that 1-2% difference that you would think like this might be something that you need to get before we even start?
Okay. And by the way, I just want to reiterate what you said so everyone really hears and understands that. Contest prep, natural or enhanced, is not healthy. Getting that lean is not healthy. You add drugs on top of the equation, it's really not healthy. So I don't want people to misconstrue what we do as athletes, whether that be a bodybuilder, powerlifter, strongman, football player, whatever. This is not a healthy endeavor. You're putting your body through shit to perform at such peak levels. Because when you're at your peak levels, you're also usually at your peak stress levels. So managing that's hard. Answering that question, the biggest things usually are a base of vitamins and minerals. So we need, obviously, vitamins being vital for life. So if you look at the definition, that's literally what the word means. You look at vitamins, managing systemic stress, just keeping us healthy, as arbitrary of a word as that is, as we take drugs, which are inherently driving up systemic stress, driving down systemic health, global health, we need some way to manage that. So obviously, if you're taking drugs, any kind of PED, we'll say more so on the androgen side, but still peptides and all of these other kind of drugs in play, beta blockers, whatever, uncouplers, as we'll talk about later on, hopefully, they're all driving systemic stress up and systemic health down. So we need extra vitamins in play because we're now at a deficit of health. So you need a base of vitamins. Then you realize, okay, we're taking most likely androgens. Those androgens are upregulating what? Androgen receptors. At androgen receptors, we have zinc. We have all of these different things that are playing a part in that cofactor upregulatory process. So what do we need more of? Because we're now at a gap and a deficit. Now we need more minerals. And that stands for chromium at the insulin receptor. You can go down every receptor and figure that out yourself. But essentially, we're looking at vitamins and minerals as being the most important things. So right off the bat, people are missing their zinc, their magnesium, they're missing their chromium, all those big players, their selenium, and they wonder why they're getting suboptimal results. So that's the first two big heavy hitters. From there, out of all the data I've collected, out of all the blood work, which is, I don't even know how much blood work I've seen at this point, it is so skewed in terms of it only matters on the individual, the situation, because remember, it's not just about their drug use now, the recreational drug use in the past, the family's history in the past, the abuse they put themselves under as children, all this shit plays. So that's the genetic factor that we just have to say, okay, this person is a new blank slate. Let's have blood work from a baseline and see how that trends over time. It's all about trends. If we go down a blood work panel, first thing you'll see at the top is your CBC. So your hematology panel, blood viscosity, things like that. That is the thing that could kill you, give you a stroke, heart attack, die overnight. So that's one of the things that we need to manage. Now, as a mesocycle is going on, red blood cells are starting down here and they are maturing. We're having more. Myocytes are starting down here. We have that spark in IGF. We have all those different changes in the sarcolemma, all those changes at a cellular level. Those myocytes are now maturing. So when you're training, mesocycle starts. Load, calories, drugs, everything that is lowest, they peak. Red blood cells are lowest, they peak. Everything does that. It has that peak. So at the end of your meso, your CBC, your hematology should probably be a little thicker, should probably be a little heavier in terms of a higher hematocrit, hemoglobin, all those things, because you're handling more volume. Your blood is supposed to be thicker at that point in time. So you get blood work done at the end of your mesocycle, say 15 weeks, like we said, and that hematology panel's out, kind of should be. So you donate blood or you do whatever you need to do. If you need to chelate iron, depending on the problem, usually it's an issue of literally just donating blood or bloodletting or whatever have you. So you look at that hematology panel, that's the first thing over there. Usually take care of that with blood donation. And it's a good thing, helps people out, everyone else. Okay, cool. Then we go down to something like renal health. So that's where everyone's looking at your EGFR. So EGFR is basically the filter of your kidney. So over time, if that filter breaks, that's when you go into kidney failure. Whenever you have problems with the kidney, that's where, again, based on the individual, you may be looking at an architectural-based issue or an enzymatic-based issue. If it's architecturally related, you'll see that EGFR going down. You'll need to fix that. Astragalus is the best way to do that. It'll actually change the cellular, it happens at a cellular level interaction in renal tissue, but basically it really drives up EGFR value and more or less basically recovers that filter. At the same side of the token, you look in that tissue, you look at the enzymes. There are obviously good enzymes and bad enzymes everywhere in the body, but specifically in that renal tissue, if you're having issues from an enzymatic aspect where kidneys are hurting, things like that, but EGFR is fine, fluid hydration is fine. Usually an enzymatic issue, that's something where like a milk thistle can come in and can actually drive up more proper enzymatic production and can actually dull down some of the, we'll say, less than favorable enzymes going on there. If it's going down into your liver, we'll go to liver as the next one. Liver is the big one where everyone likes to say, okay, it heals itself, it recovers itself. You don't need to take anything for that. Well, the reality of it is everything is happening in the liver. Again, I'm the growth hormone guy, apparently. So all of that crosstalk with estrogen happens in the liver. So in the liver, it's communicating with estrogen, it's crosstalk, having all those interactions with JAK-STAT, all those pathways with FOX2 and 3. That's what's driving the ultimate conversion to growth factors. So if your liver is not in a good state, your performance is not going to be optimal. Your body composition changes are not going to be optimal. So something on that realm would, I mean, man, there's so many things from a liver aspect. Everyone likes to say TUDCA. Yeah, TUDCA does lower liver enzymes. More importantly, though, systemically, the problem is protein folding. So if you're misfolding proteins, that's what's causing essentially cells to malform, become cancerous, have issues, whatever you want to call it. So a low-dose TUDCA supplementation, although it does do a very good job at the liver level specifically, actually helps with proper protein folding. So that's an entire conversation to go with nitrogen metabolism that, again, conversation for another day, but there's another potential aid there. And next one, again, we'll end with this one because we can literally keep going on and on here, but with your lipid panel, I see you smiling. It's so in-depth and there's a lot of shit to say about it. If you're having issues with your lipid panel, okay, we're looking at what's causing the problem. Are we getting an actual, there's a couple things with your lipid panel I should probably say first. Are we looking at particle size or are we looking at total value? Particle size basically looks in and sees, okay, are these HDL, LDL particles light and fluffy or are they dense, thick? If they're dense and thick, those are the worst kinds. We want big and fluffy so they can move throughout your bloodstream easier. If you're looking at total value on your lipid panel, the two biggest things that matter to me, actually, know what? No, probably just ultimate total HDL value and then particle size. Those are the two biggest players. Obviously, we can't have a cholesterol of 700. You need to look at total cholesterol, total LDL values. But if your cholesterol is, we'll say, manageable, if your LDL is manageable, but your HDL is high, you're probably pretty good. You check your particle size, okay, you know where to go from there. Now, on that side, that's where we have the citrus bergamots. That's where we have the niacins. We have the krill oil, fish oil. They're all used for specific reasons and purposes. You don't just want to throw everything at it. But usually those are some of the baseline things that you'll have in play. It usually starts off with the EPA, DHA, fish oil, krill oil, sorry, tongue's getting tied there. And then you kind of assess from there because it's all about EPA and DHA total value. So that's driving all the health benefits from that aspect. From a blood work aspect, again, I could keep going on and on, but I feel like I'm saying a little too much because I'm even tongue twisting myself.
Oh, no, I know you could probably talk an hour just about like one of those, and that it's great, but like, let's, yeah, we'll probably touch back on it at some point if anyone will want to hear that, because I just want to direct them onto you because I really want people to know where to get good information from. And it's very hard to find. Like, everyone is an expert, and when you actually talk to them, they just chat out of their ass. And they just listen something somewhere and they just regurgitate and all the same stuff. And I've seen some blood results and whatnot. Just recently I spoke to one of guys and he sent me his blood result and I'm like, I would be suicidal if I had this. Oh yeah, I feel a bit down. And I'm like, no shit, what are you fucking taking? And we're starting to list all these things. So people don't realize how important blood work is. You know, and all these little things, they don't even know where, like, they just take everything. So they go on, they hire a coach, and they just give them a massive list without ever even checking if they need anything. So maybe you could touch up on what are the downfalls if someone starts to, like, let's smash TUDCA, for example, takes high amount every single day. So is there any downfalls they need to look out for, or what would you say about like over-the-counter supplements?
Yeah, so that's kind of in the same note, and I do want to apologize for everyone. If I start talking very fast, it's because I get so excited. I've been working on that, but I have so much to say in my brain. It usually kind of spills out, and everyone calls it an Alex moment. So if I have those Alex moments, I do apologize. Taking too many health supplements, taking too many PEDs, it's all the same thing at the end of the day. Obviously, PEDs will usually, because that encompasses a pretty broad category, that's all going to be playing towards that systemic stress equation and fatigue that we talked about before. It's the same thing with all your over-the-counter health supplements. So although it's good to supplement with a deficit and a problem that you have, if you only have a deficit with your lipid panel, then why are you supplementing for your renal and your actual liver-based issues if that's never going to be a problem for you genetically? So that's why we get blood work. So we know exactly what we need and what we don't need. It's the same thing with drug use. Do you need the volume retentive effects from like an androlone? Do you need some of the changes that can happen with the CYP aspect from a trenbolone? Do you need the changes, whatever, fill in the blank? It's the same thing. So it's just using the right tool for the right job, the proper prescription. It's like if you were a doctor and you're writing yourself a prescription, it's looking at what you actually need and give yourself that. That's really all it is. So there are tons of contraindications and issues whenever you're involved in polypharmacy and polysupplementation in terms of over-the-counter based issues, things from blood volume-based issues to you name it. So from that aspect, we're always looking at, okay, what's my PED selection look like? What's my blood work? And then what am I missing at this point in time? What's going to happen in the future? And also, where's my family tree saying? Was everyone in my family, did everyone die in my family from cancer? Did everyone have cardiac-based issues? That's usually a good determinant for what's going to be out of whack on you. Not always the case because our environment, our lifestyle changes that, but it can still say a lot.
So continuing on from that, let's move into performance enhancements and work your way up. I want you to start from someone comes in, they're dead scared. Let's start with the safest, in your opinion, things that is efficient, and then lay out all there is, what you actually see in real life, what people do, and still come out on other side to tell the story kind of thing. So start from your way down, up. So I want you to just give your opinion about what is the safest and efficient thing. It don't necessarily need to be cost effective. And then work into like, this is what people actually do, and this is what they have gone through. Like we already determined, it's not healthy. So let's just dig into it.
Okay. So I think I want to start off with something like a local level competitor, going to national level, going to professional, something like that. If we start from that, you have your first cycle. So whatever that approach is, it's usually going to come down to a milligram per kilogram based equation. Broderick's very well known for coming out with those numbers. I think I credit the anabolic family tree and a lot of those basic numbers to him. But at the same time, for everyone out there, you can look in the literature, and that's how doctors prescribe shit. So if you look at basic TRT, that's usually 0.5 milligram to 1 milligram per kilogram of body weight of testosterone. So that's TRT, testosterone replacement. You go up into what Broderick has termed as athletic HRT, which I love, so I'm giving him credit there, and that's about 3 milligrams per kilogram of body weight of total androgens. So that's HRT, involving, could be just testosterone, could be whatever else. So you have your baseline amount of testosterone that you need in play. You need that to literally just be a man, just to have a high libido, high function, high performance. Now, the problem there is most people use a lot more testosterone than they need, but the same problem is some people just respond very freaking well to testosterone. Now, most people are only going to need about 2 to 3 milligrams per kilogram of body weight of testosterone, and then they'll fill in the rest of their anabolic milligram needs with something else. So do they just need protein expression with very little on the neurological capacity, looking more like a Primabol? Something with a little bit more estrogen management, something like a Mastron, something with the volume retentive, but still the colloid synthesis benefits, okay, something like an androlone. Do you only need the aggression? Do you need the changes that can happen on a nutrient partitioning side of things? Okay, maybe like a trenbolone. Do you need issues and changes with not only acute, but long-term injury prevention, recovery from a colloid aspect, as well as background changes in anabolism and lipolysis? Okay, maybe like a growth hormone. Do you need, and are you having issues with fuel supply issues? Probably something like an insulin metformin. So you go down this list of asking yourself all these questions, you put up your first cycle, you start at, we'll say 3 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, begin there, and then you slowly go from there. You have your blasting, your cruising periods. So obviously during those cruising periods, we're looking at something like an athletic HRT where total milligrams are about 3 milligrams per kilogram. And then once you blast, you slowly tick that up. You don't go right away because androgens are all about chemical signaling. It's all based on that equation. So week to week, throughout your mesocycle, do you need more of a push on protein expression? Do you need more of a push on performance? What do you need a push? What are you lacking? It may not be androgens at all. It may be an anabolic. It may be a peptide. It may just be freaking food. It may be a change in your training. So week to week, you're having checkpoints, you're making these changes. So going back to the drug equation, because I know that's what the question was asked, but I want to make sure that everyone's on the same page with that. We are starting off with everything based on need. Everything's based on body weight as well as response. What we also have to take into consideration is the genetic component. Like we talked about before, everyone has different drug responses. A lot of the professional athletes stepping on the Olympia stage, I'd say probably 70 to 80% of them, they're not taking very many drugs. Everyone likes to talk about the 5 to 10 grams of androgens that they're taking. They're not taking that. And again, I'm not just speaking out of my ass. I consult with these people. I work with them directly. They're not taking half of the stuff that national level competitors are. That's not to say that one is right and one is wrong. It's all based on the genetic equation. Some of those guys can get such a robust response out of such a small amount, and or they can or cannot handle the side effects tolerated with it. That's what matters. So they either get a very robust response out of a little, or they get no side effects and can push a ton of drugs. So based on that genetic equation, that basically determines how much drug you're going to have to take. Doesn't matter the level. It almost doesn't matter the body weight. I mean, to a point it does. That helps you get some basic guidelines. But when you're dealing with a professional level athlete up here, compared to someone on the Olympia stage compared to someone down here just doing their first state local show, you need to know your response. Can you take that little amount and get a robust response or not? So just because, like for myself, during my last prep actually with Broderick, we worked up to 2 grams. I know plenty of people on the Olympia stage that are nowhere near 2 grams and have never been there. I'm never going to be a Olympia-based athlete, but that's a lot due to my genetics. Not only just muscle volumes and insertion, but how I metabolize drugs and my overall response. So when we understand the overall milligram equation, then it's just plug and play for what drugs you think you need. So you sit down and you ask yourself, okay, am I missing issues with performance? Is it a neurological based issue, the fuel supply issue, structural protein based issue? You do the same thing that I was saying before. So the number, and the reason why I'm setting it up like this, and it's very broad, is because it is very broad. You're looking at people at the state, national, and pro level. And again, you can see some very similarities and some wildly drastic different changes between those 3 things. I don't feel like there's a right or wrong time to add an insulin or growth hormone or trenbolone or testosterone. It's all based on need. So I know that kind of throws a wrench into, because I know you want a guideline, a specific type thing, but I can't give that because that's not how I see things as a coach. Whenever you see things from that variety of drug responses, it almost gets very hard to say, okay, if you're on the Olympia stage, you have to be taking 5 grams, or to get here, you have to be taking 20 IUs of growth. It's not that. I've taken 20 IUs of growth hormone before, and I respond amazingly. I only get bigger, I only get leaner, I get 0 side effects. But yet you give me like 50 milligrams, 100 milligrams of trenbolone, and I turn into a mess. It is terrible. Acid issues out the ass. I mean, terrible gut issues. So I can't live on that. So you do your own. It's called anabolic mapping. I did not come up with that. That was Dan Duchesne. It's literally just finding out what drugs you respond best to, what you need, and the dosage range that you're looking at. That's really all it is. So when you're looking at personal anabolic mapping, that's going to set up your future. Just figuring out what you need to respond to, what you respond best, and then basically doing that.
So how does it differ between genders? Because that will be a massive question.
You say genders?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a big difference there because the side effect profile, not only that, but the robust response, like we talked about before. You give 1 IU of growth hormone to a female versus a male, the female is going to feel like a brand new person. They're going to drop body fat. They're going to recover. They're going to sleep well. Their skin's going to glow. They're going to look better. You give 1 IU of growth to a guy, most guys are going to be like, okay, I'm a little more recovered, but nothing crazy. Some people do have that crazy response, or they just can't tolerate the side effects. But usually the female response, due to body weight, due to other changes metabolically, it's so much more robust over there. So then, okay, what else do we have to look at? Let's look at side effect profile. Guys don't care about being more masculine. Girls do. Girls have to look out for clit growth. They have to look out for changes in the deepening of their voice. They have to look out for changes facially, with actually more from a skin textural aspect of androgens, things like that, because they do change that, especially at a lower level of body fat. They have to look out for the hair growth, things like that. So when you're looking at the gender-based equation, the females over here are very much side effect adverse. They have to keep an eye on it a little bit more than guys. So that means that our cycles have to be a little bit shorter in duration. So a very easy setup would be something like a 4 to 6 week on, 4 to 6 week off approach in terms of androgen usage. You obviously have to equate if you're using an oral versus a short-acting ester, things like that. But no matter what, you need time on and time off a lot more than the traditional 12 to 20 weeks blasting and cruising like a guy. So when you look at that from the female aspect, you say, okay, if I can only have 4 to 6 weeks on an androgen, let's just say the, what's everyone love these days? Let's say Anavar. Actually, no, let's say Turinabol, because no one gives Turinabol any love anymore. So that big player on energy systems, that's what the CrossFit women should be taking. Let's say they have their Turinabol, they're responding very well 4 to 6 weeks on. You can't keep doing that for another 4 to 6 weeks. I mean, you can, but it's not only a milligram equation for females, but it's a duration equation. So the side effects will build up over time. If we limit that 4 to 6 weeks, we come off. What are we changing now in that post-blasting period? So this is where you have your female athletic crews, HRT, whatever you want to call it. In the background, and this is a subject kind of for another day, but it's that female athletic HRT of potentially testosterone replacement, potentially progesterone replacement, things like that. But that's, again, 5 milligrams per week of testosterone, something literally just to replace that female, but that's kept at a background all the time, okay? That's, again, conversation for another day. But during the periods of no blasting, no androgens, why not play with the peptides? Why not play with a weak anabolic aid like a low-dose clenbuterol to drive global anabolism and global mTOR? To me, it sounds like a very good idea to avoid side effects to do 4 to 6 weeks Turinabol, 4 to 6 weeks growth hormone insulin clen, something like that. But again, it comes back to the periodization of what they need. But overall, it's mainly with females looking at short durations, looking at side effects, and looking at what drugs they need. Females respond very well to obviously that 19-nor category, given 19-nor testosterone. And if you look at like some research, what was it? I was researching back whenever my wife was pregnant, because I really am into that. And I've actually been doing that a lot more lately because I have a lot of people who are trying to get pregnant this time of year. Look at a lot of pregnancy research, embryology, gestation, things like that. You'll realize that females produce 19-nor testosterone, that derivative, whenever they're pregnant. So, okay, that's why they respond a lot better to 19-nors. At the same time, though, they may not want that fluid retention. Mentally, they may not be able to handle it. So maybe we may go with a primobolan or an Anavar or whatever arbitrary thing we need based on the secondary characteristics that we also need. So drug selection for females, I mean, for everyone is very specific, but for females, I would say it's even more specific and even more limited because there's certain things with females that we'd rather not see. I mean, again, I try and be completely honest about things. I don't think that females should use Trenbolone. That being said, I've worked with females that have used Trenbolone because they needed it in terms of they would not prep without it. They had already used it before, they loved it, and that's what they would not prep without. So, okay, I'll oversee that. I don't think it's a good idea, but we've still done it. I'm not saying that for anyone else out there to try, but it's still something that happens. And I think that's a question you asked before is what's really happening. What's really happening, and again, this goes back to the person if they don't respond extremely well to a lower dosage or someone is just side effect adverse or whatever, I mean, it can get pretty crazy. It's pretty common for me to have a female to come to me taking about 500 to 700 milligrams of DECA or something like that. I've had females come to me on, 200-300 milligrams of Trenbolone, a couple hundred milligrams of testosterone. And the problem is too, I almost can't fault them when they're at that high muscular level because their physiology at a cellular level, they're guys. Internally, they are guys. At a cellular-based level, you treat them like males because they're now males. They're not females anymore. And I'm not saying that to be rude or mean or anything because it's not anything about their appearance or their voice or anything, but at a cellular level, they're now operating like a male because they were never supposed to be 200 pounds with fucking striated glutes or whatever arbitrary number you want to put there. They weren't supposed to have that amount of skeletal muscle tissue. So at that level, at the Olympia level, working with those kinds of female athletes, it definitely changes. And then remember, it changes from bikini to physique to bodybuilding to all that stuff.
Yeah, so that's cool. It's like so much stuff that people can kind of dismiss, and they usually treat girls before they even start as guys already, before all those changes kind of come in play, before they actually deserve the place to be treated like that. So you have girls on doing local show in bikini, just smashing all sorts of kind of things, and never thinking about anything.
Exactly, yeah, and that's kind of the problem because usually females need a very small amount, like 2.5 milligrams of Winstrol or Anavar per day is a pretty big dosage. At puberty, females are at their highest hormonally. It's what? It's like a milligram a day. It's maybe 7 to 10 milligrams of total hormone per week. That's not very much. You do 2.5 per day. That already jacks them up higher than they've ever been before. Not only that, but it's the starting low and building up over time. A lot of women that I work with, if they're not at that they're not trying to get hypermuscular, the low-dose clenbuterol, the weak anabolic aid, the growth hormone, the insulin, things like that, it can play a massive benefit for them from an overall anabolic and lipolytic aspect. Now, once you want to become hypermuscular as a female, androgens have to be in play. Unless if your genetics are ridiculous, it happens, but it's very few and far between.
So what I'm hearing from all this is like, probably preference to start with would be to get in someone super shredded, super lean, disregarding gender and whatnot. Let's go into probably number one thing, safest one would be growth, something like that.
So purely from a health aspect.
Yes.
So like, okay. So long term, what's going to cause the most damage on health in terms of changes with body weight, cardiac tissue remodeling, neurological interventions, everything as a whole, androgens take the cake. Those are going to be the worst things for you over time. The problem is they're also the best things for you in terms of building muscle tissue. They will build and express more protein than anything else. So it's a give and a take. You look at your peptides, like your growth hormone and insulin, and the actual problems are very small. So obviously, I say very small, you have the chance of death with insulin from going hypoglycemia and things like that. But let's be very open and honest here. If you die from insulin usage, it's the same like dying from DNP usage. You're a freaking idiot. And I don't say that to be mean at all, but come on, it's all a dose and timing equation. It's not that freaking hard. People will look at their insulin syringe and they'll see the 30 and they go, oh, that has to be 3 IUs. No, you're looking at the fucking tick marks. That's 30 IUs of insulin and you wonder why you're going hypo. Not only that, but
I've seen that.
Actually, what's that?
I've seen that as they go like, God damn it, I'm hungry and I can't see and I'm this and they just stand there and sweat profuse. I'm like, you've done something wrong. You've done something terribly wrong.
And I'll be honest, again, everyone makes that mistake. I've made that mistake before, but it's because if you're partaking in drug use, you can't just be rushing. You have to be very precise and specific. Science, pharmacology, it's very precise and specific. That's what it's supposed to be. So when we're looking at the health equation, peptides, I mean, insulin, again, if you are actually being precise and specific, you're usually not using very much. I mean, certain people can, but at that level, you're eating more than enough to circumvent anything from a hypoglycemia-based issue. Look at growth hormone. Everyone loves to talk about the growth hormone guts and things like that. Those guts are caused from systemic fatigue. Look at alcoholics. Look at anyone out there with some kind of systemic health problem. That's what the gut's coming from. That's the peripancreatitis that Broderick always talks about. That's the systemic gut inflammation that you see in every diseased population. Small limbs, very disgusting trunk. That's what it is. So you're not getting gut issues from growth hormone. It's not because the IGF receptors or whatever people say. You're not getting the growing of what does everyone say now? They say like you growing of bones and growing your forehead and some of the stupid things like that. And the reality is once growth plates close, that does not happen. Growth hormone is a very specific drug. So that's why I said it's very sophisticated based on when you take it. So it does all of its different things in the background, releasing lipase, glucagon, going in, changing those actual lipid reduction or accelerating lipid reduction genes and decreasing some of the lipid accumulation genes. It's going through the things with colloid synthesis, but the change is whenever it's applied, that spit out of growth factors at the liver level, it's having a cross, if you look in literature, it's called crosstalk. So in the liver, it has crosstalk with estrogen, a bunch of these other hormones, and basically sees what tissue is being damaged right now, what needs are healing capabilities. So if you're a growing child, 6 years old, taking exogenous growth hormone to grow taller, you're not having myological changes and damage mechanically based from training. You're growing. You have a bone issue that's trying to grow. So what does your liver say? It says we need more growth factors that are going to be specific to bone health. Okay, so the osteoblastic does that shit. If you are above maturity, so if you're actually a mature adult, 18, 20, whatever the hell age you want to start off at and talk about, then you start seeing, okay, guess what? Those growth plates close. What now environment are we in? We're in a highly myologically damaged, induced environment. So you have a very hard training session, a lot of myotrauma going on, a lot of muscle tissue being damaged. That's what it sees. If you were to break your leg, even though you're a big, strong bodybuilder, you break your leg, all of a sudden, if you're taking your growth hormone, it's sending all the growth factor and all the growth production to that broken leg because that's what has most of the trauma. So based on when you take growth hormone and what's the problem, that's what it's going to fix. That's essentially, it's a very childlike version. And I showed you before, but I'll show everyone else out there because we're talking about growth hormone. I was writing this the other day. That's just some of the interactions, kinetics, cascades that happen with growth hormone usage. And I'm only showing you that because it's that important. It can do so many different things. It depends on the environment. So growth hormone, and I'm being very specific in this topic because everyone complains about growth hormone having so many health side effects. You would have to take so much growth hormone. You would have to take it for such a long duration of time straight, specifically. We're talking about a dosage that most people can't afford or could handle the side effects from. You'd you'd have to take that for years to have a lot of actual problems. So if you are partaking in polypharmacy and you're matching your drugs based off of your training, based off of your nutrition, based off of your time of year, your growth hormone should look like this. It's not going to be 10 IUs. It's not going to be 6 IUs. It's maybe 2 to 4 to 6 to 8 to 10, maybe back to 2 to 4 to 6 to 8 to 10. It depends on your paradigm. It's not going to be a straight linear equation, just like androgen usage. So back to the health equation, androgen's way up here, peptides way down here, and then things like your metformin, those aren't even on the screen. Those are way below where the risk and issue is so low. I wouldn't put much thought into it as long as you're being we'll say an adult with it and not being stupid.
Yes, that's cool. So all these things combined, let's touch into the most extreme things you think you have seen, or maybe even try on yourself, that were required to get someone in their best shape of your life. So I want you to touch into DNPs, probably all the risks and all the rewards and whatnot. So what would you say was the most extreme thing you have seen or tried yourself or on anyone, or you know, you have so much data collected that I have seen some cycles that people do and I'm like, how the hell are you still alive? But they are alive and kicking. So I would like to know, so the most extreme things that you have seen to get as thin as possible, and probably the mildest thing that you have seen, maybe practiced yourself, that can get someone as lean as possible. So that people understand that it's never going to work one way or another. But as we have touched up many, many times, and you have mentioned that probably being healthy to begin with is a very good thing. So don't even attempt it to even further damage yourself. Just understand that some people can tolerate a lot, but most won't. And
Okay.
you take a couple months in, when you're touching into something that's not in your body in those levels, you probably would be wise to check up on yourself all the time. And having someone who understands how to read your blood work would be extremely beneficial just to survive. So
seriously, okay, so I usually hate having these kind of conversations because I don't want it to sound like I'm giving anyone the secret to getting lean.
I don't want you to touch on any dosages or anything, but just basically what's being taken, maybe. It's your call. So how deep you want to go into this, but just to compare. So this has been done, and the person got in amazing shape, and someone else had to do way more extreme things.
I got you. See, the problem too with this equation is I find it more from a nutritional and cardio aerobic based equation being the problem. Meaning I have had some women that I've worked with where they are protein sparing modified fast straight from Lyle McDonald type thing with hours of cardio per week, ridiculous amounts, because they don't have tons of muscle tissue. Metabolically, they are not the best. They hold so much fluid, being that gender. They have so many issues with fluid dynamics, you name it. I usually see a lot of things like that where I think that is some of the more extreme things. If we're looking at drug usage as a whole, that's a different equation. If we're looking at drug usage,
I would agree. So sorry for interrupting you. So I would like to hear, like, what was the most extreme approach with training, cardio, like calorie deficit, and all those kind of things. So people understand it's not just drugs.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to make sure I was trying to touch on. So, okay, from that aspect, we'll use the female equation. Literally about 0.8 grams per pound of body weight from protein and vegetables. That's it. That's nothing from a food aspect. They've had to go that low on top of the background having some kind of, because there's a calorie drug equation here where as calories go down, drugs have to go up to make that gap. So, and we're talking about females that are hypermuscular and females that are hypomuscular. So big and small girls were just metabolically, they were just not ever meant to be competitors. I hate to say it, but a lot of people, male or female, they're not all going to be eating the 400 grams of carbs a day. So these females, some of them, not all of them, but a couple of them that I've worked with have literally had to go down to that low of levels of protein. Aerobically, they're looking at doing about an hour to 2 hours, about an hour to 2 of low intensity cardio per day. So literally just trying to drive caloric expenditure. Usually I hate using aerobic work to actually drive fat loss. We're mainly trying to use that to drive all of the aerobic benefits to drive actual anabolism. So all the enzymatic processes there. That's usually why I prefer to use cardio. Problem is, these girls aren't those kind of people. So we've had to push cardio fairly high. The drug equation, like I said, we have to have some kind of anabolic backbone there. So let's just say it is a, in certain situations, it could be an Anavar, it could be an NPP. Again, it could be based on the person, but it's usually not that the androgens are so high. It's that those are at a baseline level, but then something like thyroid, clenbuterol, those have to be higher because the food can't go anymore. So you have a moderate amount of androgens, a low amount of calories, a high amount of cardio, and a higher amount of thyroid, clenbuterol, something like that. Females can tolerate a higher amount of T3, well, not T4, but T3, T4, whatever you want to call it, and not have a lot of the issues post-dieting like males do. For males, you're going above a replacement dose of 25 micrograms of T3. You're usually going to be cutting in on some kind of muscle tissue there because obviously it's just expending calories. It's not specific. It's just pulling calories. Now, females also respond very well to a low amount of DMP. Now, we're looking at DMP. Again, everyone talks about it being an oxidative phosphorylator or uncoupling ATP, just bleeding off energy. The problem is that's a very generic way to talk about it. When you look at DMP, it decreases the formation of high energy phosphate bonds in the mitochondria. We look at that, it works like this. We have DMP, mitochondria, where oxidative phosphorylation occurs, happens there, interacts with glycolysis, interacts with reuptake into mitochondria, inhibits energy processes, comes down here, accumulates inorganic phosphates within the mitochondria itself, causes issues with that final energy conversion process, proton leak, and then heat production. So that's a very kindergarten way of explaining how DMP works, but it's important to know if you don't understand what's going on with inorganic phosphates or that proton exchange process, you're missing out on a lot of it. Look at what DNP, and I guess we're getting into the DMP topic here. I guess we kind of have to. Everyone should know by now, but if they don't, I know I love DNP. Not specifically, and it's funny because actually me and Boston Lloyd, we're actually really good friends. We were talking the other day, and I honestly don't use DMP very much with people anymore because they just don't need it. It's an awesome tool. I argue it and I'm an advocate for it so much because it's so fucking awesome. You look at it as a drug and it's so sophisticated in its action. It's so incredible. If you really want to learn about beta oxidation, go research and understand DNP. So that changing of acetyl and acetyl groups dropping off into the mitochondria, coming into those different cellular membrane layers. It's really cool and interesting. And I love that shit. And I've been actually kind of off topic, but still on topic. I have one contact over at Mitochond Pharmaceuticals. So that is the company that's coming out with some of the new pro drugs of DNP. What the fuck's the name? MP201, I believe. So it's a pro drug of DNP, meaning it's orally inactive and activated later on in digestion to actually drive more of the neurological and neurodegenerative aspects of it. So they're using DNP, well, this pro drug, MP201, to actually increase and improve people that have Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, things like that. So you look at that as a proton for uncoupler, because that's what DNP is. Again, this is a pro drug, but DNP as a whole does so many things. The actual effect that you can get from driving more androgen receptor uncoupling and binding. So if you look at actual sex hormones, it's all a temperature-based equation that will get those receptors uncoupling. So we have affinity and constant. So these androgens will come in, they will bind to the receptor, send their signal, come back out, and go to the next receptor. Okay, so that's binding affinity, coming in and sending its signal, and the binding constant is it holding there and then releasing. You can drive rapid uncoupling of those androgen receptors in a higher temperature environment. So if you are applying systemically high temperatures, you are theoretically increasing uncoupling. You are therefore theoretically increasing the efficacy and effects of your androgens in play. So you could literally take a low dose of DNP in the background to have to take less androgens long-term to drive more growth momentarily, more anabolism momentarily. Not only that, but you're lubing and greasing the wheels for beta oxidation. You are literally driving ATP uncoupling through the fucking roof. You are driving up so many different factors that, to me, it's so interesting you have this drug that can completely change the equation. Dosage-wise, again, over the years, I've changed a lot. I have had people, honestly, again, being completely honest, because I hate when people bullshit about DNP use. If you talk to anyone, it's very common to use a gram of DNP. I'll be completely honest. I don't like it. I don't really prescribe to that, especially now. I'm very much of the 50, 100, maybe 200 milligrams of DNP every other day, and then slowly work up. It's more for the background benefits that you're getting from it. But people are definitely using a gram of DNP. I've observed and I've had people, and I have run over a gram of DNP before just to see what it's like. And it's absolutely terrible. The amount of uncoupling and the receptive process that happens there, it's pretty crazy. But if we're looking back at some of the original literature, so go back to, what was it, was it in the 30s? Tainter and Cutting out of Stanford, they did all the original studies with DNP, so 2,4-dinitrophenol as a whole. They looked at some of the carcinogenic, can never say that word, type activity. So did you ever read the book Illegally Thin, by the way?
I haven't finished it. I have tapped into it now and then, yeah.
Okay, so his book is awesome. It's almost, it's a very conspiracy theory type, but it's so true and it's so honest. The problem with that book is applying it for a bodybuilder. So that's where I feel like I can kind of bridge the gap. Either way, going back to those original studies, they had, and I feel bad because they used dogs. They had one group of dogs where they overdosed them on DNP and one group where they did not. They have just under the lethal dose of DNP. Both dogs, both groups, they actually went ahead and they checked all the organs afterwards. So all the dogs died in the end, which I don't like because I love puppies. But either way, there was no organ damage done. Even in the people that died from DNP, it's because of that spontaneously changing in thermoregulation. So they were dying from the heat dissipation. They weren't dying from organ failure. They weren't dying from their hearts exploding or livers failing or kidneys failing or anything like that. Those were not seen. The problem with DNP, it was labeled a carcinogen because there was one outbreak and they had cataracts in, there was one city, I forget where it was. It was an issue with the manufacturing of DNP back when it was legal, but they had issues of outbreak of cataracts in that one specific town, and he talks about it in that book, and that's why it was labeled as a carcinogen and pulled off. It was also pulled off of the shelves because some idiots decided to overdose on it because, I mean, they committed suicide. I think the number, it's under 60 people in the history of DNP usage have actually died from it. And those were either intentional overdoses or what the hell is the other one? No, I think they were all intentional overdoses. Oh no, or unintentional overdoses where people take 4 capsules, say they don't feel it, they take 4 more, say they don't feel it, take 4 more, and then they're fucking dead. So it was either stupidity, which again, I feel bad because they're dead, but it was either stupidity or intentional. 60 deaths. DNP was prescribed to hundreds of thousands of people. There was this one guy in Texas back in 60s or 70s after DNP was outlawed. He had hundreds of thousands of weight loss results out of his clinic. He was prescribing DNP legally, but no one was dying. The way they used it back then was longer, as Broderick says, longer, lower, slower, which is funny because with DNP usage, it is a longer, lower dosed drug. That's how it's meant to be used. Now, the dosage is based on body weight. So if you have a 300-pound bodybuilder, then obviously his dosage is going to be higher. You also have to take into account the DNP quality. There was that one guy that everyone knew, his name was dinitro. So obviously 2,4-dinitrophenol. He was dinitro. Everyone knew him on every forum. He had the best DNP out there. No DNP ever stood it was never close in quality to production as his was. Nowadays, the problem with DNP use is a lot of people can handle these gram dosages because it's very underdosed. It's not good quality product. There's differences in types of DNP and how it's manufactured that once again make it such a sophisticated drug. So if you understand the manufacturing process, if you understand the kinetics and cascades behind the drug, it makes it so interesting. And that's where I argue, because it's a tool for a job. Most people don't need it, but if you need it, it can really save your ass in a lot of different ways. So I went off on a little rant there on DNP. Where was I going with that?
Going with most extreme ways of losing weight.
Oh, yeah, okay. So that's the problem today. People will take 500, 600, 700, a gram of DNP, and they'll feel like shit. But it's also not properly dosed, properly manufactured, properly made and cared for DNP. So in reality, the active ingredient is probably in the low hundreds, 200 to 400. We also have individual drug tolerance, like we talked about before. Some people can handle a shitload of DNP, actual, real quality, high quality DNP. Most people, once you're above, if it's high quality DNP, 500 to 750 milligrams is a freaking death sentence. I've experienced that. It's terrible. But at the same time, in today's society, most of it is, the quality is terrible. It is absolutely terrible. No one understands the true chemistry behind it. I mean, people do. It's very simple to synthesize, but we have obviously finances coming into play. So people just aren't putting in the same care and love, to be completely honest, anymore. So now we have an issue of dealing with a product that's underdosed. So now you have to equate for that. So if you have someone who comes to you and they're taking 300 milligrams of DNP every day, and they say, I feel like $1 million. I feel perfect. A little bit of sweating, but I'm good. Okay, it's probably like 50 or 100 milligrams, which isn't bad, but it means you have to make up for that. The problem with that is then what if you do get a capsule that is actually properly dosed? All of a sudden, it ticks that number up from 200 to 300 to 600. So DNP is not safe. DNP is not healthy for you. DNP can kill you. I'm not saying the DNP is safe or healthy, but we're taking drugs. Drugs aren't meant to be healthy. To me, looking at these androgens, these peptides, these uncouplers, anything in the PED realm, it's so interesting to me. It's the chemistry behind it, the application where I get off on. I get so excited to learn more and more about it. And then I apply it with the application, because reading it on paper is cool, but it doesn't mean shit unless you actually apply it. So off of the DNP subject, I could talk about that forever. Going back to what you said about the most extreme things, we'll do the opposite now, because I have seen people take that extremely high dose of DNP, 1 gram, 2 grams. I question the quality of it, but it is what it is. On the opposite side of things, there's plenty of people who have just taken 200, 300 milligrams of testosterone and gotten shredded, no problem, male or female. Well, on the female side, HRT of 5 to 10 milligrams. So it goes back to the genetic equation, the drug metabolism, and the spot where they're at. If you're going on the Olympia stage, I mean, you can play with fire because that's your job. Your job is to be a professional bodybuilder. Your job is to take drugs. That doesn't mean just take all the drugs in the world, but if you have to be a little more creative or push the milligrams a little bit, that's your job. That's how you're putting food on your table and a house, a roof over your head. If it's not your job, the problem comes in now where people are getting so excited they think the more is better equation. It's not the kitchen sink approach. It's all about actual signal. We talked about that before. You need just enough drug from any category to send a signal to get the response you want. That's all you need. You take more drug when you need more of a signal, more of a response of protein expression, uncoupling, thyroid assistance, whatever that is. So I don't think I gave your audience the answers that they were hoping to hear, because there's definitely people that have taken 3 grams of tren, 10 grams of total androgens per week, but it's more few and far between than people think. People aren't abusing drugs as crazy as you would think. I think it's actually more the recreational drugs that are being abused.
I hear it a lot, and people go, especially in like strongman and powerlifting, and they're like, people are lying. Biggest and strongest guys are taking 10 times more. And I'm like, I'm not being funny. I come from Latvia, where is arguably some of the strongest guys on the planet. So they take jack shit. Like, I remember we had this guy, he was 80 kilos body weight. He was benching 225 raw, no straps, no t-shirt, no nothing. And he was taking 500 milligrams of test a week. That's it. And everyone then was thinking, you are crazy. You are taking so much. Yeah. I come in here, you got like 70 kilo guy taking that every other day. And you're like, why? Or just why? And they don't eat, they don't train, they feel lethargic, they feel sick, they focus, they get depressed, and they have all the side effects possible, but no effects. And you just go, maybe you need to slow down something. It's like going out and having a good night and starting with a liter of vodka to begin with. It's just...
But I want that to be the take-home message from everything we've been talking about in the past 10 or 20 minutes. Dosing drugs higher or lower only matters to you. It only matters to your environment, to your response. Just looking at someone's 500 milligram cycle or gram cycle means nothing to you or anyone else, And then, like you said, there's the whole other equation of all the other factors. Most people, scrolling back to the meeting about vitamins and minerals, people aren't doing the basic shit that they should be doing to optimize the drugs in the first place. So you can take all the drugs in the world and you'll get some response, but guess what? You'll get a better response if you actually do shit right and know what you're doing. And that's where I argue application matters, but you still have to have some common sense, some basic biological background knowledge, or you're just shooting yourself in the foot and taking more drug. And like you said, almost getting more side effects.
So from all this, I would like to see if you can summarize like a profile, male and female, which would be like optimal kind of genetical structure, health markers, supplements that they have on them that work, they don't work, and basic approach, how they scale themselves and monitor themselves to get the best out of themselves. So can you kind of summarize, like if this is a male, I would look into making sure blood markers are this and that, over-the-counter supplements that might be needed at some point just because they're going to go down the dark path. Maybe this would be good if they have it at home, don't necessarily need to use them straight away, but have it just in case. And then in aspect of PEDs, maybe start with this, then work up your way into this and see if that agrees with you. And I don't want you to talk about dosing or whatnot, because that's extremely individual, like we already kind of cut clear through that. And then females, right, they need to work onto this. They need to have someone probably who are honestly assessing them. Okay, you are starting to grow bits that were not there. See if you want to keep pushing on and all those kind of things. So can you kind of, like, this is obviously extremely individual, but at the same time, is there maybe 70-80% of people that fall into this one area that are going to get the most benefit out of doing a similar approach rather than, you know, having an extremely individual approach all the time? Just see if your thoughts on that are kind of...
Yeah. So sadly, I think this entire conversation has built to the answer of, I can't do that. Purely because if you go back and listen to the genetic changes, the need for, okay, what are you missing from a drug aspect? It becomes individual based on the person. Now, if everyone re-listens to this podcast, you can also listen to some of the highlights that we hit for, okay? So if you were starting off as a female, where are you putting your milligrams? Is it coming from a peptide category, an androgen category? Androgen categories have to be cycled back and forth. You're starting off at a lower dosage. Everyone is always looking at their blood work every 2 to 3 months, no matter what. You're always trying to see. Yeah, exactly. You wish, you know. But I think this entire podcast is actually the guideline and overview to answering that question. So instead of me answering that, because it's kind of what we just talked about, everyone rewinds from the beginning and pick up on all the guidelines that we put out there. Because I think that is, although I wish I could say, okay, beginner, you start here, you do this for both male and female. It just doesn't always work like that, because we have ethics that come into play. We have morals that come into play. We have legality issues. We have just access issues. If a female would respond best to growth hormone in this next phase, but she can't get it or can't afford it, it doesn't fucking matter how great it is. We still can't get it or afford it. So I would much rather, I feel like I'm dodging your question, but it's also a question that I can't really answer in a general sense.
No, you're not dodging anything. This is why I'm asking this question, is because you have guys walking in the gym. Oh, I want to get ready for summer. Right, you need to take this, and that. They don't even look at them. They don't know their backgrounds. They don't know how good they are with diet, what their preferences are, how they got to be stress factors like affecting them and whatnot. So what I am trying to get from you is actually what you just said, because people think it's like, if I want to get there, I need to do this. That's it, nothing else. It just don't work that way. And people just are so adamant to like, oh, this coach knows the best, and they do exactly the same stuff with everyone. Like, yeah, it might work 60% out of the time, but those 40% who suffer terribly, they just go silent. Yeah. And that coach just don't give two shits about them, because they actually
and for every aspect out there, training, nutrition, drug use, over-the-counter supplements, there's no tablet that the drug gods came down and wrote in stone that you have to do this for drugs. Same thing with nutrition, same thing with training, same thing with everything we're talking about from a blood work aspect. There's really no rules. I hate saying that. There's some basic common sense things. There's experience that comes into play, but there's really no rules. So if anyone, like you already said, if they say, okay, the best first cycle is 500 milligrams of testosterone, right away, okay, tune that person out, just because that's just stupid. If everyone says growth hormone only starts working at X IUs, okay, tune that person out, that's just stupid. So go through, and I think everyone, if you're trying to find good information, because I am far from the smartest person out there, I'm not the only person to get good information from, but start vetting the people that you're listening to, start vetting their information. If there are very bold statements in terms of it's a black and white equation, they're probably wrong. It's usually a gray area where a drug offers a very specific thing, do multiple other things, but does a very specific action, and it depends on the environment and the person it's being introduced to. So like I mentioned about DMP, it may be fucking awesome. I may love it. I may have a hard on for it all the time, but it's not for everyone. It's not a tool that always needs to be utilized. Same thing with growth hormone, same thing with insulin, same thing with whatever drug you want to say.
Yeah, no, it's been like literally amazing. So I really appreciate your time. I know we could probably talk for a couple of days just on this topic alone. But I think it's pretty much summarized what I actually want to like figure out from you. And it's cool that we are kind of on similar page about all the thoughts and whatnot. You obviously but balls deep into all of this. Like my approach is slightly different to everyone I work with. That's why I'm never shy to kind of reach out to people like yourself. And I want to know like things I'll never have time to figure out, because my preferences are slightly different. Same like you you get really like excited about talking about these things, and I might be excited about other things, and and this is where people need to actually realize that just because they listen to one person, there is nowhere near how can I even describe that? You don't need to take everything as just this is the right thing. So always question yourself and always just.
Oh, yeah. And I try and tell people too, like, don't take my word for it that this shit is right. Go out there and research yourself. Like, go out and fact check me. Like, if you just take anyone's word as gospel, if you look up to them, if you think they're smart or whatever, fact check them, because I'm wrong plenty of times. Everyone's wrong. We're all humans. And not only that, but you don't have to be as in-depth as I am on the science realm of things. You don't have to be whatever. It depends. Again, I hate saying this because it's been the conversation of this whole topic. It depends on the person. So if you're trying to pick a coach, you pick personality style. You pick, okay, who he's worked with before. If you have a guy who's only worked with Olympic athletes or Olympians stepping on the bodybuilding stage, they work with the cream of the crop, where you could give them a bowl of shit to eat and they're going to respond. So if you are someone with lesser genetics, look to someone who's coached lesser genetically based people. There's a crossover. That's why I said at the beginning, I love working with people from every different level, because it's interesting. It's not all the same thing. The people at the top, those pro athletes, they're almost I don't want to say too easy to coach, but you do anything and they respond. So what ends up happening is usually you just fixing things as a coach of what they're doing wrong. So it's not the fact that you're so good as a coach working with these pro people stepping on the Olympia stage. It's the fact that you're correcting all the mistakes that they should never be making in the first place. They got away with it because of their genetics. So just, again, pushing a little more towards what you said, it's a good idea to follow everyone, but always fact check everyone. Don't just take everyone's word for it.
Yeah, this is like probably another thing we could talk about, like picking up coaches and whatnot. And I had just conversation yesterday, but I'm not going to go into details, but it's like someone is picking up a coach only because they have really good clients. And I'm like, yeah, but you are not there. You will not fit in. Whatever he's doing with those people will not work on you. Most likely, you're just going to waste your money and his time.
And I feel bad for the people that hire the coach based on their physique. And obviously, I feel like that's kind of easier for me to say because I don't have a pro physique. I've been very clear about that from the beginning. But 5'8", 262 pounds, abs separated, I look pretty I'm not a small human. You look to where I was 2 years ago. I've made a shitload of progress. I'm fairly large. I'm fairly lean. But I'm not a pro. That's one of the reasons why I never post my pictures of my physique. I mean, I do every now and then. I mean, hell, here, I'll show you right now just because of my last progress picture so everyone understands where I'm coming from. So definitely, I don't even know if you can see.
Yeah. I've seen it a few times.
So, I mean, not a pro, not an average person, but whenever you start advertising your physique, whether I was a professional and I had that good physique or not, I don't think my personality is such that I would have posted my physique, because I don't like using that as a marketing tool because it doesn't say anything about your ability to coach. If you have great genetics, and most of the best coaches out there, they're not the guys on the Olympia stage because they had to troubleshoot and find the right. And I'm not saying that there aren't good coaches who also have great physiques. I'm just saying look to other things than just how they look. Again, easier for me to say though, because I'm not a professional athlete. So
yeah, that's when picking a good coach is like comparing Michael Jordan to be a good coach. He was the best ever, but the guy's running his team to ground, for God's sake. But no, really appreciate your time. Probably took a hell of a lot out of your day out. But really, all these things, I think it's something that people don't really want to talk about. And like I said, people just jump to conclusions that there is one thing that fits everyone. And if I go to this coach, he's going to get me in best shape. And if he's not really like open-minded that, you know what, I've done a lot of things with these kind of people, they work for them, and they might leave their hand. If they're not willing to leave their hands up and say, look, it's probably something that I do wrong that doesn't work on you. So it's probably not a good fit for this kind of stuff. But it really, really like kind of helped in understanding that, look, make sure you do your background checks first. being lean and stupidly lean is nowhere near healthy as people think. You might look great, but you know yourself, you feel crap, your mood is nowhere there, your sex drive is not there, and everything else that comes into play, you're not really social and everything like that. So your training takes over your life, your nutrition is just most of the time miserable. So like you said, like some things like 0.8 grams is like, Jesus Christ, it's just eating bloody broccoli all day.
Yeah.
You know, these things need to come into place, that people need to be realistic, that for some it's much easier than for others. And unless you are extremely clear in your head, you got to go through the hell just to get in that shape of your life once in your life, just to understand what it takes for you. Don't try it, because it might be walk in a park, but it might be bloody living hell. So, yeah. And
Yeah, man, with most people, it's pretty damn hard. Just being that lean and being alive. Oh my God. I mean, everyone who's a good competitor looks forward to that, but at the same time, it's not easy. It may be fun, but it's not easy.
At the same time, those last 2 weeks, you don't even talk to them because they're miserable as hell. I remember one
Yeah.
rep I did. I don't remember last 10 days of it. I was lean. I was shredded. All I can remember, my friend came over, picked me up, and next thing I'm sitting on the back of the car with a trophy, and everyone's like, "Yeah!" And I'm like, "What happened? I don't even know what happened."
Yeah.
I was just absolute potatoes at that point.
Yeah.
So, no, cool, Alex. Where can people find you? What's the best way to kind of reach out to you if they are interested in some consultation? What do you actually do? Like, do you do consultations? Do you do online coaching based on, like, let's work a couple of months in a row? Or do you have any books or anything that people can get from you, which is outside of this interview?
Yeah, I think most of my information, because I post a lot of free shit. If you guys go to @Alex_KIKEL, so that's my Instagram handle, www.theprepcoach.com. So there's my coaching services, consultations, things like that. I actually wrote, I think, the only book on injectable quarantine out there. So I have that to offer people. I put out so much stuff. If you go to my Instagram, or I have a free forum where I answer people's questions all the time. So theprepcoachforum.com. Just literally type in the prep coach Alex Kikel into Google and shit'll pop up. I offer a ton of stuff. I try to offer a lot of free stuff for people. So I don't want people, like, I appreciate you pimping out my services and, and giving me a shout out here. I really do appreciate you having me on. But before anyone would even think, if you would even like to work with me, follow my stuff for a while, because I could probably answer probably more than half your questions just for free. So don't pay for anything unless you have to. I really don't like people having to spend money if they don't have to. That's part of the reason why I do all the free content, because I understand, especially with 2020, this year fucked a lot of people in the ass. So if you guys could save some money and just learn from me peripherally from the free stuff I put out, do that until you're financially stable. Life has to come first. Those priorities have to come first. Then you could do luxury things like coaching and things like that. So yeah, just Google me. All that stuff will pop up. But I really appreciate you having me on, man.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks for your time. Like I said, it's kind of refreshing to talk with someone who's understanding their shit instead of just someone who's just blagging everything and going through that. I'll pop on some of your details underneath anyway, so people can reach out to you and actually learn some good stuff, because stuff you put out there is just mind blowing, to be honest. So and it's cool to have people like yourself who are actually, like, not just wanting to put stuff out there, but actually excited about putting stuff out there and learning about it. So I really like that about yourself. But yeah, that's a wrap from me. I think we could talk about a million other things, but we're just going to stick to this one. I think it's been quite long chat anyway. Anything you want to add, or anything before we kind of wrap it all up?
Yeah, just one last thing. You really talked me up in here. So guys, when you go to my Instagram and stuff, don't think too much. I'm a normal person. Sometimes I go to the bathroom, take a shit, wipe my ass, my finger breaks through the toilet paper, just like everyone else. So not that special. I just love what I'm doing, and I'm very happy to be in the position that I'm at. So you did talk me up. I appreciate that. But everyone, don't expect too much. Not that special. So
right, we got to wrap on that. Thanks for your time, and I'll chat to you soon.